A single choice. That is all it takes to alter a destiny, to define a legacy. In February 1942, as the Japanese war machine sweeps across Southeast Asia, one man finds himself at a crossroads. He stands on the Indonesian island of Java, not in the direct path of Singapore's devastating fall, but watching the same storm gather on his horizon. He holds a unique position of leadership, a surgeon in a war that respects no rules, no conventions of medicine. The world around him collapses into chaos, yet he makes a decision that will echo through generations, a choice that defies logic, military strategy, and even self-preservation. He chooses to stay. But what compels a man to knowingly walk into the mouth of a living hell? The year is 1942. The Pacific theater is ablaze. On the Indonesian island of Java, amidst the swirling currents of war, stands Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Edward Dunlop. Born on July 12, 1907, in Wangaratta, Victoria, Australia, Edward Dunlop grew up on a farm, a foundation that instilled in him a strong work ethic. His early academic brilliance led him from a pharmacy apprenticeship to a scholarship at the University of Melbourne, where he pursued medicine. He graduated with first-class honors in 1934 and went on to earn his Master of Surgery in 1937. Furthering his expertise, he traveled to London, England, in 1938, becoming a Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons. Edward Dunlop was not just an intellectual. He was a formidable athlete, representing Australia in rugby union in 1932, a sporting prowess that contributed to his enduring nickname, WWII, a playful reference to Dunlop tires that never wear out. When World War II ignites, Edward Dunlop enlists in the Australian Army Medical Corps in November 1939, bringing his exceptional surgical skills to the battlefield. He serves with distinction in the Middle East, participating in campaigns in Jerusalem, Greece, Crete, and Tobruk as a senior surgeon with the 2nd Casualty Clearing Station. By early 1942, as the Japanese offensive sweeps through Southeast Asia, Edward Dunlop and his unit are transferred to Java, a crucial Allied stronghold in the Dutch East Indies. Here, on February 26, 1942, he receives a promotion to temporary lieutenant colonel and assumes command of No. 1 Allied General Hospital in Bandung. The situation is dire. Singapore, the supposedly impregnable British fortress, falls to the Japanese on February 15, 1942, a mere week before Edward Dunlop's promotion. This catastrophic defeat sends shockwaves across the Allied command, signaling the rapid collapse of resistance in the region. Java now stands as one of the last remaining bastions. The Allied forces on the island, a mix of Dutch, British, American, and Australian troops, are undersupplied, often undertrained, and facing an enemy that has demonstrated ruthless efficiency and overwhelming force. Edward Dunlop, at the helm of a critical medical facility, understands the gravity of the unfolding crisis. His hospital, already preparing for the inevitable, is the final line of defense against disease, injury, and despair for thousands of men. The challenges facing Edward Dunlop and his medical staff in Java are monumental, far exceeding the typical demands of wartime surgery. The very air is thick with the knowledge of impending doom. News of the rapid Japanese advance through Malaya and the fall of Singapore filters through, painting a grim picture of what awaits them. Allied command, stretched thin and often disorganized, struggles to provide adequate support. The troops arriving on Java are a diverse, often exhausted, and demoralized collection, many having already endured the brutal retreat from the Malay Peninsula. These men are not only combatants. They are also potential patients, suffering from tropical diseases like malaria and dysentery, in addition to battle wounds. The hospital in Bandung, despite being designated as No. 1 Allied General Hospital, operates under increasing strain. Supplies, already limited due to the long supply lines and the British focus on the European theatre, dwindle rapidly with each passing day. Essential medicines, surgical instruments, and even basic hygiene materials become scarce commodities. The humid, tropical environment itself presents a constant battle against infection and rapid deterioration of medical supplies. The sheer volume of anticipated casualties, exacerbated by the nature of jungle warfare and the Japanese disregard for medical conventions, threatens to overwhelm their capacity. No one truly believes Java can hold. The Japanese 25th Army, under General Tomoyuki Yamashita, has already demonstrated its brutal effectiveness in Singapore, where they captured approximately 130,000 Allied personnel. The speed and ferocity of their advance leave little room for optimism. The Allied forces on Java, roughly 32,000 strong, including Dutch, British, Australian, and American troops, are a fraction of the Japanese strength and lack coordinated air and naval support. They are about to be proven catastrophically wrong in any hope of holding the island. The institutional resistance comes not from within his own medical team, but from the overwhelming, inescapable reality of a superior enemy force. The Allied military strategy in the region has crumbled, leaving medical personnel like Edward Dunlop to face the consequences of a failing defense. The primary obstacle is not a single decision, but the grinding, inexorable advance of an enemy determined to sweep away all resistance, and the grim certainty that they will soon be engulfed by it. The true test will be how Edward Dunlop, and the principles he embodies, will endure in the face of such absolute destruction. The early days of February 1942 see a frantic, yet ultimately futile, effort to reinforce Java. Ships carrying troops and supplies, including Edward Dunlop's unit, arrive, but the Japanese air and naval superiority make these movements hazardous. Allied forces on Java consist of the Dutch East Indies Army, elements of the British 1st Armoured Brigade, Australian 7th Division troops, and American air units. The combined strength is estimated at around 32,000 men. However, many are battle-weary and poorly equipped, having been diverted from other fronts or hastily assembled. On February 18, 1942, the Japanese begin their systematic air attacks on Java, targeting airfields, naval bases, and critical infrastructure. The skies above Bandung, where Edward Dunlop's No. 1 Allied General Hospital is located, become increasingly dangerous. The relentless bombing raids inflict casualties, and the hospital prepares for a deluge of wounded. Edward Dunlop and his medical staff work tirelessly, establishing triage protocols and readying operating theaters. The sounds of distant explosions and the constant drone of Japanese aircraft become the grim soundtrack to their daily lives. By late February, the Japanese invasion fleet is assembling. On February 26, 1942, as the final preparations are made for the invasion of Java, Edward Dunlop is promoted to temporary lieutenant colonel, a recognition of his leadership and surgical expertise in these critical times. He now commands a vital medical facility, responsible for thousands of lives as the battle for Java looms. The invasion begins in earnest on March 1, 1942. Japanese forces, primarily elements of the 16th Army, launch amphibious landings at multiple points along Java's northern coast, including Merak, Iridan-Wetan, and Kragan. Their strategy is swift and decisive, aiming to overwhelm the scattered Allied defenses. The Allied naval forces, already decimated in the Battle of the Java Sea just days earlier, are unable to prevent the landings. As Japanese infantry battalions push inland, the fighting is fierce but brief. Allied units, lacking air cover and effective communication, are quickly outmaneuvered. Casualties mount rapidly on both sides. Edward Dunlop's hospital in Bandung becomes a focal point for the wounded. Stretchers arrive continuously, carrying men with shrapnel wounds, bullet injuries, and burns. The medical staff, working under immense pressure, performs countless surgeries, often with dwindling anesthetic and antiseptic supplies. The humidity and the sheer volume of cases create a constant fight against infection. The situation deteriorates with alarming speed. Within days, the Japanese seize key strategic locations. On March 7, the Japanese occupy the capital, Batavia, modern-day Jakarta. The Allied command realizes further resistance is futile. Meanwhile, within the Japanese 16th Army, the advance through Java proceeds with a calculated brutality. Orders from Lieutenant General Hitoshi Imamura, commander of the 16th Army, emphasized speed and the swift subjugation of the island. Reports from forward reconnaissance units indicate disorganized Allied resistance, with pockets of Dutch, British, and Australian troops attempting desperate counterattacks or falling back in disarray. Intelligence suggests that the Allied forces are demoralized and poorly equipped, a perception reinforced by the rapid collapse of their naval presence in the Java Sea. The Japanese command views the capture of Java as a critical step in securing their southern resource zone, particularly the island's oil fields. They anticipate a swift victory, believing the White Devils lack the will to fight effectively in the tropical environment. There is little consideration for the Geneva Conventions or the treatment of medical personnel, the OBJ. Active is total control, and any resistance, perceived or real, is to be crushed. The rapid advance, while successful, creates logistical challenges, but the momentum of victory overshadows these concerns. They are confident that Java will fall quickly, a mere formality after Singapore, and they are largely correct in their assessment of the Allied military capacity. On March 8, 1942, the Allied forces on Java officially surrendered to the Japanese. For Edward Dunlop, this moment marks a profound shift. His role as a military surgeon transitions abruptly into that of a prisoner of war. The No. 1 Allied General Hospital in Bandung, along with its entire staff and patients, falls into Japanese hands. Edward Dunlop now faces a choice. As an officer, he could potentially attempt an escape, or at least distance himself from the immediate plight of the captured. Yet, his commitment to his patients overrides all other considerations. He makes the conscious, agonizing decision to remain with his men, refusing to abandon the wounded and sick under his care. This act of defiance, this unwavering dedication, sets the tone for his entire captivity. The immediate aftermath of surrender is chaotic. The Japanese begin processing the thousands of Allied prisoners. Edward Dunlop, now a prisoner himself, uses his temporary lieutenant colonel rank and his inherent authority to advocate for his men. He argues for the humane treatment of the wounded, for access to medical supplies, and for the recognition of their status as non-combatants. These early interactions with his Japanese captors are fraught with tension. The Japanese, accustomed to a culture where surrender is dishonorable, often view prisoners with contempt. The initial period of captivity sees Edward Dunlop and his men confined in makeshift camps in Java. Conditions are basic, with overcrowding, inadequate sanitation, and a severe lack of food. Dysentery and malaria become rampant almost immediately. Edward Dunlop, with his limited resources, organizes what he can: rudimentary hygiene systems, attempts at rationing food, and the continuous care of the sick. He improvises surgical tools from whatever materials are available, demonstrating an extraordinary resourcefulness that will become his hallmark. If you had been in Edward Dunlop's position, with a chance to distance yourself from the immediate dangers of captivity, would you have chosen to stay and face the unknown alongside your patients? Tell me in the comments. As 1942 progresses, the Japanese begin to consolidate their prisoners. Edward Dunlop and the Australian POWs under his command are transferred from Java to Singapore. This move, occurring later in 1942, places him directly into the aftermath of the island's fall, into the sprawling, overcrowded Changi prisoner of war camp. Changi, originally a British military barracks, is now a vast, squalid holding facility for tens of thousands of Allied prisoners. At its peak, Changi holds over 50,000 Allied POWs. The conditions in Changi are a stark reality check. The camp is severely overcrowded, housing far more prisoners than it was designed for. Sanitation is primitive, leading to the rapid spread of diseases. Food rations are meager, consisting mainly of poor quality rice and limited vegetables, leading to widespread malnutrition, beriberi, and other deficiency diseases. Water supply is often unreliable, further exacerbating hygiene issues. Edward Dunlop, upon arrival, immediately confronts the scale of the medical crisis. He establishes medical facilities within the camp, using whatever buildings and spaces are allocated to the POWs. He works alongside other Allied medical officers, including those who witnessed the horrors of the Alexandra Hospital massacre in February, where between 150 and 200 staff and patients were killed by Japanese troops. While Edward Dunlop was not present for that specific atrocity, the stories undoubtedly reach him, painting a clear picture of the enemy's ruthlessness. Edward Dunlop's leadership in Changi quickly becomes evident. He organizes medical teams, establishes a system for patient care, and, despite the severe limitations, attempts to maintain a semblance of professional standards. He consistently places the welfare of his patients first, often at great personal risk. He begins a tireless campaign to negotiate with the Japanese authorities for better rations, more medical supplies, and improved living conditions for the sick. These negotiations are rarely easy, frequently met with indifference, and sometimes outright hostility. The sheer scale of suffering in Changi is immense. Thousands of men are afflicted with dysentery, malaria, tropical ulcers, and other debilitating illnesses. Edward Dunlop, a highly trained surgeon, is forced to practice medicine under the most rudimentary conditions. He performs operations with minimal instruments, often sterilizing them over open flames, and using improvised sutures. His resourcefulness is legendary. He creates artificial limbs and needles from bamboo and buffalo skin. He mentors younger medical officers, sharing his vast knowledge and inspiring them to continue the fight for their patients' lives. Considering the immense physical and mental toll of such an environment, what do you think would be the most difficult aspect of maintaining hope and purpose as a medical professional in a POW camp? Tell me in the comments. As 1942 draws to a close, the Japanese plan to construct the Burma-Thailand Railway intensifies. This ambitious project, designed to create a strategic supply route between Bangkok and Rangoon, will require hundreds of thousands of laborers. The Japanese decide to use Allied POWs as forced labor. In January 1943, Edward Dunlop and approximately 1,000 Australian POWs, a group that will become known as Dunlop Force, or Dunlop's Thousand, are transferred from Singapore to Thailand to begin work on the railway. This transfer marks the beginning of the most brutal chapter of his captivity. The journey from Singapore to Thailand is itself an ordeal. The POWs are crammed into stifling, overcrowded railway wagons, often rice trucks, with little food or water for days. The heat and lack of sanitation are unbearable. Upon arrival at the Connew River Camp on January 25, 1943, Edward Dunlop and his men are immediately confronted with the horrific reality of the railway camps. The environment is dense jungle, remote and unforgiving. The Japanese overseers demand impossible work quotas, enforcing them with extreme brutality. The conditions on the Burma-Thailand Railway are even worse than Changi. The men work long days from early morning until late at night, under the scorching sun or in torrential rain. They are given meager rations, often just a mug of rice and watered-down tea, which leads to severe malnutrition and starvation. Diseases like cholera, dysentery, malaria, and tropical ulcers are rampant, claiming lives at an alarming rate. Beatings by Japanese guards are common, and the sick are often forced to work or face severe punishment. Edward Dunlop, now truly in command of Dunlop Force, establishes a system of cooperative leadership within his group. He implements survival principles. The fit care for the sick, and the young look after the old. He risks his own life daily, confronting Japanese guards and protesting the treatment of his men. He argues fiercely against forcing the gravely ill to work, often enduring severe beatings for his defiance. His tall stature, nearly 2 meters, and his unwavering resolve, often intimidate his captors, even as they inflict physical punishment upon him. He creates makeshift hospitals in the jungle, operating with the most primitive tools under unimaginable circumstances. He performs amputations, treats horrific tropical ulcers that consume flesh, and battles epidemics of cholera and dysentery with virtually no medicine. He improvises medical instruments, even using bamboo for artificial limbs and buffalo hide for sutures. His ingenuity and determination saved countless lives that would otherwise have been lost. He often gives his own meager food rations to the sick, further weakening himself but strengthening the resolve of his men. The psychological toll is immense. Witnessing the constant suffering and death, the casual brutality of the guards, and the slow erosion of human dignity is a heavy burden. Yet, Edward Dunlop maintains his composure, his medical ethics, and his sense of humanity. He keeps secret diaries, recording the atrocities and the daily struggles, a testament to his belief that these events must never be forgotten. What does it tell you about a man that he made the choice to stand up to his captors, knowing it would result in physical punishment, when everything was already stacked against him? Tell me in the comments. The construction of the Burma-Thailand Railway is a race against time, for both the Japanese and the POWs. The Japanese demand its completion by October 1943. The death rate among the prisoners is staggering. By the end of the railway's construction, approximately 2,650 Australians, over 11,000 other Allied prisoners, and an estimated 75,000 Asian laborers, known as Ramusha, perish due to disease, starvation, and brutal treatment. Edward Dunlop's force endures these horrors, his leadership a beacon in the darkness. He moves between different camps along the railway, including Hintok Mountain Camp and Dessau Hospital, continuously tending to the sick and injured. He fosters education and entertainment among the prisoners, encouraging them to maintain their morale and mental well-being despite the grim reality. He believes that preserving intellectual and cultural life is as vital as physical survival. He coordinates with a heroic Thai merchant and resistance worker named Boon Pong, who secretly supplies food and medicines, though these are never enough to meet the overwhelming demand. These clandestine operations are incredibly risky, and their discovery would undoubtedly lead to severe punishment, potentially execution. Yet, Edward Dunlop persists, knowing that every single dose of quinine or every extra morsel of food could mean the difference between life and death for one of his men. It is a sweltering afternoon in late 1943, deep within the jungle along the Burma-Thailand Railway. The air hangs thick with humidity, the stench of disease, and the pervasive reek of human suffering. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Dunlop stands before a Japanese guard post, his imposing figure casting a long shadow in the filtered sunlight. Around him, the skeletal forms of his men, Dunlop Force, are lined up, haggard and exhausted after another grueling day of forced labor. Many sway on their feet, their eyes hollow with starvation and sickness. Cholera and dysentery sweep through the camp like a scythe, and fresh cases of tropical ulcers fester in the heat. A Japanese sergeant, known for his particular cruelty, points a bayonet at a young Australian private, barely more than a boy, who has collapsed in the mud. The private is clearly gravely ill, his skin jaundiced, his breathing shallow. The sergeant barks an order, demanding the boy rise and continue working. The Japanese officer, a captain, stands nearby, observing with cold indifference. Edward Dunlop steps forward, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the jungle din. He speaks in carefully chosen Japanese phrases, learned through painful necessity, explaining that the boy is too weak, that he will die if forced to work. He points to the boy's distended stomach, a clear sign of severe malnutrition and beriberi. The sergeant sneers, raising his bayonet. The captain dismisses Edward Dunlop's plea, declaring that all prisoners must work, regardless of their condition. No work, no food, he states, a common, brutal mantra. Edward Dunlop refuses to back down. He knows this moment. He has faced it countless times. He steps directly between the sergeant and the fallen private, shielding the young man with his own body. He reiterates, with an unwavering gaze, that a dead man cannot work, that a living man, if allowed to recover, can contribute. He appeals to a sliver of practical logic, if not humanity. The sergeant, enraged by the defiance, lunges. The bayonet strikes Edward Dunlop's chest, tearing through his threadbare uniform. A gasp ripples through the assembled prisoners. Edward Dunlop stumbles back, but quickly regains his footing, his hand instinctively gripping the wound. Blood seeps through his shirt, a stark crimson against the grime. He does not cry out, does not flinch. His eyes remain fixed on the Japanese captain, a silent challenge in their depths. The captain, momentarily taken aback by Edward Dunlop's stoicism and the visible injury, hesitates. The scene is a tense tableau. The injured Australian surgeon, defiant, protecting his dying patient. The furious sergeant, bayonet dripping. The silent, suffering rows of prisoners, and the impassive captain, weighing the immediate confrontation against the ongoing need for labor. The captain, perhaps sensing a potential mutiny among the desperate prisoners, or perhaps a flicker of grudging respect for Edward Dunlop's unyielding will, finally barks an order to the sergeant. The bayonet is lowered. The captain gestures curtly towards the fallen private, indicating he can be removed. Edward Dunlop, clutching his bleeding chest, nods slowly. He turns to his medical orderlies, who rush forward to carry the unconscious private away. He has won a small, temporary victory. One life, for now, is spared. But the wound on his chest is a stark reminder of the cost of such defiance, a price he is willing to pay again and again. The jungle falls silent, save for the buzz of insects and the distant clang of hammers on the railway. The immediate danger passes, but the relentless struggle for survival, and for humanity, continues. Edward Dunlop survives the war, enduring the remaining years of his captivity on the Burma-Thailand Railway, continuing his tireless work until the Japanese surrender in August 1945. He returns to Australia in October 1945, a gaunt but unbroken man. His temporary promotion to lieutenant colonel is confirmed, and he is demobilized in February 1946, transferring to the reserve WWII. The rank of honorary colonel. The historical impact of Edward Dunlop's actions is profound and far-reaching. He becomes a living legend among former prisoners of war, his name synonymous with courage, compassion, and indomitable spirit. His leadership and medical ingenuity under the most barbaric conditions saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives on the railway. He not only provided physical healing but also sustained the morale and mental well-being of his men, fostering a sense of community and purpose in an environment designed to strip them of both. After the war, Edward Dunlop dedicates his life to the welfare of former POWs, becoming a fierce advocate for their health and rights. He continues to practice medicine, specializing in surgery and cancer, and holds numerous hospital appointments in Melbourne. He actively promotes reconciliation with Japan, believing that hatred serves no purpose, and works to foster closer ties between Australia and Southeast Asia. He co-founds the Australian Asian Association and helps young Thai surgeons study in Australia. Edward Dunlop receives numerous honours for his extraordinary service, including being knighted in 1969, named Australian of the Year in 1976, and made a Companion of the Order of Australia in 1987. He publishes his War Diaries in 1989, offering a harrowing and deeply personal account of his experiences, which he secretly kept hidden during his captivity. Edward Dunlop passes away on July 2, 1993, at the age of 85, in Melbourne. His state funeral is attended by thousands, including former POWs, who come to pay their respects to the man who embodied courage and humanity. His ashes are later scattered over the Burma Railway, the very ground where he fought his most desperate battles. One unexpected fact about Edward Dunlop's legacy is that in 1993, the year of his death, he was made a Knight Grand Cross, First Class, of the Most Noble Order of the Royal Crown of Thailand. This highest honor from Thailand, a country whose people suffered immensely under Japanese occupation, recognized his extraordinary efforts and compassion towards all who suffered on the railway of death, a testament to a man who transcended national boundaries in his unwavering commitment to humanity. If this story moved you, if you think these men deserve to be remembered, leave one word in the comments: unbroken. Subscribe for a new forgotten story every week.